I've got a young grandson who is just about to have his 7th birthday, and shortly followed a few weeks later by my granddaughter who will have her 9th birthday. Both have requested big wheel scooters. So it was a research project. Straight onto Amazon, what could I find and what did people say? There weren't many big wheel scooters available, but of those that were available, this particular brand got by far and away the highest score. Most people rated it as 5 stars. That immediately got me thinking, because first of all, anything with star in the name would indicate that this product is made in the People's Republic of China. Although this product comes from Germany, and 1 or 2 people think that it is of German manufacture, the design may be European, but the manufacturing is absolutely Chinese. But that doesn't mean to say that I'm against it. I'm just a bit wary because of the inconsistent manufacturing problems in the past. I ordered them late on Tuesday night and they've arrived first thing Tuesday morning the following week. So here we are. It tells us what the necessary tools are required to build this. It says first of all we need a Phillips screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, which I shall find that I've got in that set there, a Phillips head, and it will fit into this, if you like, flexible screwdriver handle. It tells me that I need an Allen key, 5mm and 6mm, which I shall also find in my flexible set here, but I've also got a 5 and a 6mm key in these T-bars. Finally, it says you require a wrench for 8 to 16mm. Well, that's fully open and that's about 16mm, and I suggest that that's probably required for an 8mm nut, an M8 nut. Finally, I've got a pair of pliers because somewhere along the way we've got to get into the packaging here. To do this with a pair of scissors, we also need a knife of some sort to break into the packet. And immediately when I open it up, I can smell camphor, mothballs. That's another sign of Chinese manufacturing. Yes, it's very well packaged. And here we are, out of the box, and as you can see, it's pretty complete. There we go. Now we've removed most of the bubble wrap. There's a plug that comes in the top of the handlebar stem. That feels a little bit lumpy, to say the least. Clunk, 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 clunk. Now obviously when they've tightened this head assembly up, they've tightened the 2 bearings, one at the bottom, one at the top. It's been compressed so hard that it's now become, as you can see, very notchy, and the balls are not rolling smoothly. So what we're going to have to do is hold the fork, and with our 10-inch spanner we're going to unlock this top lock nut, and this is just a lock nut, this big thing here. Now outside that, right on the outside, you'll see there's some rough knurled parts. That's the bearing ring that needs to be adjusted, so we need to wind that anti-clockwise. It will be quite stiff to start with because it's done up tight. Probably about, say, 10 minutes. Now you'll automatically feel that the bearing assembly has gone nice and loose. But you may well encounter a further problem when you tighten it up again, because as you tighten this nut up, it'll tend to drag this one with it. So let's give it a try. We'll hold the forks again and tighten it up. And as it happens, this has not moved. This has stayed still. If this had moved and you'd still got notchiness, you could undo it, wind it a further 5 minutes and tighten it up, so that as you tighten it up, it will still remain loose after you have tightened it. So there we go. That's nice and free now, that assembly, and we fixed a problem that I'm sure isn't mentioned in the setup manual. Right, we're now going to attempt to fit the front wheel, but bearing in mind the problem we had with the bearings on the stem, we really ought to just check the freeness of this shaft. Now, when you spin the wheel appears to spin perfectly okay, but when you rotate the spindle, you can feel that it's actually notchy, just like the bearing in the top there. Again, these bearings have been over tightened. So we've got to do another small adjustment before we can fit the wheel. I'm in the fortunate position where I've been able to find an old 1/4 Whitworth spanner, and it's exactly the right size to fit on this flat here, which is the tensioning nut for the bearing. This nut on the outside is in fact a lock nut. So sadly, many of you guys out there, if you encounter this problem, if you don't have a thin spanner to deal with this problem, you'll either have to go and buy one from your local store, your bike store, or take the wheel into the bike store and they will adjust it for you. Or maybe you've got a next door neighbour who's a keen cyclist. He will have the right tools to do this job. So we're going to put the thin spanner behind the lock nut, and then we're going to loosen the lock nut. So as you can see, the lock nut is now completely loose, and this behind it is the adjuster for the tension on the bearing. So you'll need to hold the spindle on the other side and then loosen this one slightly. And as soon as we loosen it, just a little bit, you'll feel that it goes absolutely smoothly. Now when you tighten it up, it may go notchy again, so you might have to unwind it little by little. And as you can see, as I tighten the lock nut up, and this is what's happened in the factory, as I tighten up the lock nut, it drags the bearing clamp as well. So what we've got to do is to set this into a nice position where it feels free, and then we're going to have to hold it in that position with our thin spanner and tighten up the lock nut, making sure that this spanner here doesn't move. And the way that you'd normally do that, to guarantee that you don't get movement between the two, is to do what I'm doing here, which is to put pressure on this one and this one at the same time, like a pair of scissors, and tighten them up against each other, like that. Now, that wheel assembly is a little bit loose now. Can you hear it rattling? That's not tight enough. It's rattling. So I've got to undo that and reset it. It'll be tight enough to not rattle. Like that, that's perfect. And it runs smoothly so that it's not notchy or lumpy. In that position, we've got to hold the bearing clamp or the bearing ring and tighten up the lock nut. And there we go. No slack, no wobble, and it's running smoothly. Yet another problem we've had to deal with, which won't be mentioned in the manual. Now we're going to fit the wheel, but here's a tip. Before you fit the wheel, fit the mudguard. Now the mudguard fits onto this bolt that's sticking through here, so this little bit goes to the front. You can assemble this reflector on as well, but I'm personally not going to bother with that. The nut that's used to fix this on is something called a nylock nut. It's an anti-vibration nut, and it's stiff. You can't just wind it on. You wind it on till it hits the plastic, and then all of a sudden it becomes very, very stiff. Once this nut goes tight, you won't be able to do it up by hand, and you'll need a spanner on this end and either another spanner on this hexagon bolt at the back here. There's also a slot for a Phillips screwdriver. It's a number 3 Phillips screwdriver that you'll need to go in there. You can then hold the nut with your adjustable spanner and tighten the whole assembly up with your screwdriver. So if you don't do that at this stage, it's not a disaster, because it will wiggle into place after you've got the wheel in, but it's so much easier to do it now.